Hey, how you doing? Let's do it to you. Sorry. Ugh. Alrighty. Let's see here. All right. What we're on here is now. The new chapter is chapter 8, Past Pawns. Okay, we're on. It's called Baby Queens on the Run. That's the name of it. And this is what he's going to be talking about throughout this book. I blend in most pawn structure themes in with other subjects, weak pawns, space, etc. But after a lot of thought, I decided to give past pawns their own section. That's what Jeremy Silverman said. My reason for doing so is one: a pass pawn can be a static powerhouse or a dynamic game winner. Like if it's running down the board, like sometimes on special teams, if one of the players in football catches the ball, and sometimes they're able to run it all the way down and get a touchdown. That's kind of a dynamic setup. But if like a special team gets the ball but gets it to maybe a 40 or 30 or maybe 50, that's kind of a static setup because even though the player got tackled, one of the special team guys, he got it to the 50 so that when the team comes out and plays offense, now they have something to work with. So you have your dynamic, which is like a touchdown type of situation, are gaining a lot of yards for the offensive team to then strike out from that spot. Thus, understand it will also improve your. Thus, understanding it will also improve your understanding of static and dynamic. So, pass pawns are very vital. That's why he's doing it. Pass pawn. Uh, Pass pawn discussion or discourse is the ideal training ground for concepts of blockades. So pass pawn discussions are like if you're wanting to do it is an ideal training ground for concepts of blockades, like having a knight in front of the pawn to stop it from progressing. A pawn majority ultimately its ultimate goal is to create a pass pawn. So a pawn majority's ultimate goal is to create a pass pawn. Thus, understanding pass pawns vastly increases your understanding of pawn majorities. 4. A pass pawn, even protected pass pawn, can often turn out to be a serious disadvantage. This shocking fact alone warrants the creation of this section. Okay, there's pass pawns, there's passers, and there's past. He calls it past, like banana, which is I'm not sure what that means. We'll find out what all that means. And our baby queen are like some other phrases. There's some other ones I don't understand. Whether you refer to them as past pawns, passers, past, a favorite among players, baby queen, sometimes they're called that, and a passed pawn that just sits there looking, doing nothing, are in the case of fast moving pawns. They're called nimble pawns. Like they can tiptoe nimbly. Nimble pass pawns. This particular kind of pawn has captured the imagination of respected amateurs everywhere. A protected pass pawn is given even more reverence. Basically, what he's saying is, its reverence is of respect. It's a sign of respect. Basically a protected pass pawn has a reverence of respect because it can't be taken, and if the piece that's in front of it moves, you're in trouble. Very, very bad trouble. Since nothing can hurt it, and at any moment it might rocket to the 8th rank and become a queen. And if the pawn is owned by the opponent, turned into something unpleasant, turns into something unpleasant. So if the pawn is owned by the opponent, so basically your opponent, it could turn into something very unpleasant if that happens. In this chapter, we're going to stare in awe at the unstoppable passer, while also demonstrating how nimble a pawn's ability can be foretold by stopped by a blockader. Yes, a passed pawn can and often does invade the end zone and makes a touchdown, like what we talked about. But it can just as easy find itself basically glued to a square, where a blockader could stop it, unable to move or influence the game in any meaningful way. The material in this section will make your view of passed pawns more realistic and give you the ability to decide when a passed pawn is gold or whether it is nothing more than fool's gold, as I like to say. So this is called creation. The most common way for a passed pawn to be born is in a vast majority, pawn majority. Here's a clear example of a pawn majority right here. So we do have to set up the board. Okie dokie. I thought there would be a game, but hey, we will get there. We will. Okay. Let us proceed. Oops. Yeah. Ay. Let's get this. This is looking kind of intense, isn't it? Very intense. When you have a lot of forces surrounding each side, you know that there's something gonna happen in this, and it's gonna be fun to watch this come to pass here. So let's see here. I gotta make sure I have all this. Perfect. So far, good. All right. I appreciate your patience on that, because I just wanted to make sure it gets set up. Because when these trades start happening, it's gonna really be fun to watch. You're gonna see a lot of action or dynamic play in this. Creation. Okay, black appears to be fine, but he's actually hopelessly lost. Why? Because white has a healthy king pawn majority, while black's queenside majority is stopped. Of course, that won't be decisive, since black's queen is very actively placed. However, white realizes that he can force the trade of all of black's pieces, leaving him with a dead one king and pawn endgame. So basically, he can do that. Oh, okay. Dokie, let me see here. Oops, I gotta enlarge this. There we go. Takes, 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 takes. Queen C check, queen takes. Which this is an exclam move because of it stops all of black's counterplay. After taking here, takes. After this, queen D1, right here, F7 to F2, leaves white with an extra, this is an extra rook up. And it's over at that point. So after this, takes, takes. Things are now clear. White can easily make a pass pawn by advancing his kingside pawns, while black can't create a passer. On the other side, because of his majority is actually dislocated, which means they're not working together. It'd be wonderful if this pawn here could come over here. If that would happen, if that pawn could get to d6, then black it'd basically be a draw at this point, because these two pawns would hold that one back, and black would be able to hold that. White would be able to hold this one back, and so basically it'd be a draw. But because black doesn't have a pawn there, nothing's going to happen. If black tries c6, c6 followed by b6, white responds with b2 to b3. And then if he tries this here, white doesn't have to take. White can actually activate the king via here, and if black takes there, then he's stopped the pawns anyways. If he takes here, he takes there. I hope you did not think of this. I hope you didn't think of taking, because that actually doesn't work, because now there's a way to create a pass pawn. Yes, to queen, but this one queens would check. It does cover. You're still okay. You're still okay. You're still winning because the queen covers here. But why put yourself in that catastrophic position? Yep, okay. King f6, king f2, king e5, king e3, and then it says access denied. That's the big joke. King f5, g4, king g5, king f3, king h4, king g2. Of course, you have to make this part of the promote. King h4, c6, g3, king f6, f4, g5, king g3, king e5, h4 is erased. Black won't even come close to winning, because if takes here, G2. C6 is what was played. If G5, King H2. C6, G2, B5, A takes B, C takes B, C takes B, C4, B6, C3, B7, C2, castle, queen, queen, and rook H8 is mate. R, rook G3 is mate. King H2. White's king can endlessly move between H2 and G2 until black runs out of pawn moves, when the king will have to leave H4, thereby allowing white's majority to start its march after King G3. Alright, G6. Here. G5 leads to the same kind of end as that in the noted ninth move idea. So if this here, then you could actually play here, and now this moves. You have that mate, or this mate. So that's why G5 was played. King G3, King F6, H4, G7, H5. We finally see the birth of a pass pawn. Oops. F4, H5, and then G5. It's more or less the same after G takes, King G7, G5, and if the king comes there, you come up. And then there's mate. So G5, same exact thing happens. King E4. Oh wait. King E4. King E6. 6. 7. 3. King F5. Takes. King takes. King. G7. King F5. King F7. G5. king g7, and then g6. Well, I could also win by king e6, when all black's queenside pawns will be basically devoured or taken. King g8, king f6, king f8, check, king g8, king g6, b5, a takes, c takes, c takes, c4, b, c3, b, c2, white equals queen mate, and that's an idea. Or white equals rook mate is an idea too. After this mate right here, it is clear that a pawn majority can be a huge static plus, since it can sit quietly for ages, apparently doing nothing. Then, in the blink of an eye, it can rush forward, giving birth to a queen. However, a pawn majority can also be a dynamic powerhouse, mixing the creation of a passed pawn with some seriously nasty space gaining problems for the opponent. So how are we doing? Perfect. We're doing excellent. We're going to do another one now. We're actually going to do a game. I'm not sure I have that right. Come on, perfect. I appreciate your patience. And let's get started. Okay, it's going to be a little quicker here, so just sit back and enjoy the ride. Um, 4. Oh, I see what my problem is. And G6, F4, Bishop G7, Bishop D2, castles, knight F3, A6, knight A6, white castles, knight C7, and then A4. That stops the idea. Black's idea is to push B5. B6, rook E1, A6, rook B1, rook B8, to prepare the push. Bishop d2. Rook e8. And then h3. And b5 finally gets played. It's white center majority versus black's queenside pawns. Queenside pawn majority. Majority in general, the center is more important. So the center is more important. Excuse me. A takes B. A takes B. Oops. So. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and then b4. c4 was a possible move here, but in that case, the passed c pawn would be firmly blockaded by the knight on c3, and after rook a1, black would have a worry about e4 to e5 while also facing pressure on after this on the b5 square via rook a5. Let's see, queen. Oops, not there. Queen c2, c7, king h2, bishop a6. Knight d1. That stops the pawn take. B c8. Rook c1. Now we're eyeing right through. Queen b snare. Queen b1. And rook c7. Knight e3. Knight f6. It's time to get white's pawn, central pawn majority into action. And e5, kaboom! Exclaim. Takes. d6, rook c, c8. F takes. Knight d7. Knight g. Whoops. Knight g4. It's clear that white's base gobbling center pawns which are forcing the enemy pieces to run for their lives as they rush throughout the kingdom. Considering a clear dynamic advantage, if they don't get taken by black's pieces, note that the pressure on e5 and the rook on e8 and the pressuring that, and the knight on d7 and the bishop on g7. White's massive buildup of the kingside pieces is also more than a bit opposing of their position. So white's doing excellent here. So queen to d5. C5 could or c4 could actually be played. Then queen a1, queen c6, bishop h6, bishop h8, queen d5, d4. I mean, a powerful centralization is very much in white's favor, but c takes b might have been a better continuation on instead of c5. Taking here might have been a better continuation. It's a more interesting continuation because you're going to start exchanges, and sometimes the exchanges aren't what you actually want to go down in that scenario. Rook c2 d1. Bishop h6. Oops. That's funny. Bishop h6 is an interesting continuation. Rook c2 rook cd1, and then queen to e6, which tries to barricade the pawn. The bishop right here is actually potentially stronger. It's actually best. But queen to h6, bishop e7, bishop takes, king takes, and then queen c1, which has the idea of infiltration and basically setting up mate. Knight g5, e6, takes, retakes, f takes, then rook f1 with an immediate win at this point. If that happens, then that pawn falls with check. I take there, and after the king takes, you can actually potentially, if you wanted to, check here, if there, check, if up, there's a fork. So that's an idea. Bishop takes knight, queen h6 check, king h8, knight f6, if king g8, knight check here, knight takes, e takes, queen takes, d4 check or d5 check, bishop c6, pawn takes e8 check, rook takes e8. Oh, wait a second. Rook takes check, rook takes, take, queen takes, bishop takes, and then queen to e3 is actually winning on the spot here. You have to take properly. Knight takes here. E takes, queen takes, and then d7. Passed pawn finally moves and makes a crushing sound as it does so. Kaboom. Bishop c6, which is a mistake. C2. Oops. And he resigns here. You can see a healthy mobile pawn majority can be both a static and dynamic plus. In the previous example, the opening choice basically delegated the battle mutual majorities right off the bat. But at other times, it's up to you to decide whether or not you think the pawn majority would be the best way to go. So it's up to you. Okay, we have one more that we'll probably go over. Yeah. Yep, we'll go over one more. And then yeah. Let's see. Yeah, that queen sacrifice was actually to win. You're exactly right. That actually won the game. That queen sacrifice was. It won the game. You are right. Yeah, that's funny. All right. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you back. This is kind of a French defense setup. Hey, excellent. Happy to be doing chess again. I always love doing chess. And then there's advanced. So c4. This is an old game, 1620. So this is Greco. Knight c6. This is pretty interesting. It's a French advance variation. It's really telling. I'm glad that Jeremy Silman's doing that. The French advance. And then bishop to e3. Oops, actually, one second. What do I do? Oh, bishop d7, then bishop e3. This is kind of a different type of setup. He's going more closed now. This is the French. It's a closed variation. Usually that's not what happens. There's mainly two lines that could arise out of this. There's queen b6. There's even a very odd line, but it could be played. F6 is huge here. This is an extreme line too. So like if takes here, the knight takes, and if takes, then you get a majority in the center. It's kind of really good for black, but this is, if you're very Karpovian, this is a Karpovian line. B3, B5, A4, A takes B. Oops. My bad there. And we learned from this that sometimes this could actually be good for you to hold the center like this. A takes, rook takes, queen takes, B takes C, and then B takes C. So now you got this kind of very odd pawn setup. And of course, we understand from our last section, wherever the pawns are pointing is where you have more space. So black has more space on the queen side, where via white has more space on the king side. So therefore, both sides are going to want to attack on their stronger side. White's going to want to dominate all this territory in here. He's going to want to use all this territory in here for his max or her mass example. For good. And then black's going to want to take all this space here and use it and try to undermine white's territory by infiltrating into it. Okay, so let's see what they say. Black has captured his on c4. Basically, black's captured on c4. Either choice is playable, but one stands above the rest. D takes C is actually a better continuation, because remember, what are we playing for? Majority. This is it breaks the old rule capturing towards the center. This right here breaks the old rule capturing towards the center. This gives black far more to work with than just the standard B takes C4. Otherwise, you have to get into this, and you're working on potentially trying to go after the C3 pawn. It does violate the principles, though. With D takes C, black gets a nice home on D5 for the knight, if he so yearns to do that by playing here and in. That's an idea. E7 to D5 with the knight. Opening up the A. Let's see. Is it the A8? Where's the A8? Oh, right here. A8 to H1 diagonal also got opened up for the queen, and potentially for his light square bishop too. And most importantly, creates a queenside majority pawns. This means that black, whenever he chooses to do so, can make a pass pawn by playing this beautiful move, Kerplunk. I think black did win. Yes, black did win. You are right. This is actually the best move. So bishop to e2, and there's also d5 could be played here. E takes d5, and queen takes d5, queen b8, is fine for black too as well, and this is really strong either way. Knight G to E7 with the idea of coming in via to D5. So castles, and here comes the great warrior knight into D5. Black, with his knight living on the nice D5 square, his pawn majority ready to make a pass pawn via B4 to B5 to B4 anytime he wants, and he has an excellent position. The rest of the game, which has many ups and downs, is given without commentation. So we're going to do this without commenting, and this is just what he was talking about here. Bishop E7, Knight G5, Bishop takes G5, Bishop takes G5, castles by black, and Bishop F3, Bishop, Knight A5, Bishop takes D5, Queen takes D5, and then F4, trying to get his majority going. Bishop C, C6. This threatens, of course, the simple mate on G2. Let me see. Let me sure. Oh, Bishop C. There we go. Bishop D2. I think it's that one player that wants to play me sometimes. Knight to B3. Queen C2. Knight takes D4. This is an interesting one. Knight takes D4. Wow. That's a sacrifice. So he takes, and then queen takes check. King H1. Because he doesn't want to interpose here, because then this pawn majority can get rolling. So that's not what he wants. And if queen does that, then he'd be more than happy to trade and then get his majority going. And even here, it's about a drawn position. It's drawn. H1, so bishop to E4, queen C3. Let's see here. Queen C5. Knight D2. Bishop D3. Now the pawn is cemented and the rook's under fire, so rook C1. Knight to, let me see here. Rook C1, rook C8. Knight to B3. Using this pin, it's a nice, yeah. Let's see here. I want to make sure. What number? 27. Gotcha. C takes B. Queen takes. Rook takes. Rook takes. H6. Rook C3. B. This is kind of an interesting continuation. Equals queen. Rook takes, queen, bishop takes, and then bishop e7. Really interesting player. Rook g4. Bishop a4. King g1. Bishop f3 to go after the pawn. h3. h5. g5. King h6. And now the king could actually infiltrate in. Bad mistake. King f2. Bishop d5. King e3. h4. King f2. The idea now is, the funny thing is, if black needs to, he could even infiltrate in slightly this way, but it wouldn't work, but it is playable. King f5. King e3. Bishop g2 is an interesting move, going after the pawn. It keeps the pawn on a square where it could be attacked. Bishop f8. g6. Bishop e4. Bishop takes, then bishop to e1. King g4 to guard the pawn. Bishop d2. Bishop g2. And then king f2. h3 is protecting the bishop. Bishop c1. Bishop d5. And then king to g1. King g3. And then bishop to e3. h2 check. King king f1. And then turns into a queen check. And I thought that was a pretty cool start to our pass pawn section. This was I'm so glad Jeremy Silman put that into his book. The next section that we're going to be going over, and it has a little bit more we'll be actually able to go over 2 sections tomorrow, maybe even 3. I know for sure 2. But this was more of a bigger section, and the next one is a little help from its friends, I believe. Yeah, friends. So like maybe one friend could support it, and that's what we were talking about. So what we've learned from the start of this session is, because we always summarize up before we log off, is this: pass pawns can be a strength. I know that sounds funny. It's like, what? It could also be a weakness. Pass pawns could be a strength or a weakness, because sometimes the pass pawn will be what causes a stalemate, because it's on the rook file and it's a stalemate. It's kind of funny. You have a pass rook pawn, but and let's say it's a bishop of opposite color, but you have the wrong bishop. It's still a drawn position. So you have to always think of, is my pawn that I'm playing for a winning position or a drawn position? And that's what we learned from Greco's game versus the unknown player, is that if you would have taken incorrectly back here, if you would have taken, where is that? B takes C, you have a hard game to play. But because Greco took properly with D takes C, he was able to create this monster of a pass pawn that illustrated all the way, that basically came into its own with, it allowed basically the H2 pawn, or the H pawn, to actually become a queen, because you couldn't stop it. And that's kind of the idea. And then even protected pass pawns aren't always a strength too, because they could be a problem because it may allow a knight to get in front of it, and then now that knight has an outpost that's a tremendous headache for your position. So I guess the summary is make sure the pass pawn's a plus in your position, not a negative. Okay, enough of that. All right. I wanted to thank you all for participating and logging on. And you know what? You know what? We always got to be respectful and remember to, like what Bruce Lee says, take what you know and apply it and be willing to do something with it. And always remember this. I really like this quote. Treasure your victories, learn from your losses, and remember that mistakes do not define who you are. It's how you handle the mistake that defines who you are. And you know what? It all comes down to a choice to receive the Lord Jesus, Lord and Savior. Eternity is a long time, my friends. And you know, it's one of those things you have to decide whom are you going to serve this day, and it's an interesting decision that will affect eternity. So just think about that, my friends. For me, I appreciate it if you do. And you know what? It all comes down to our Chess Cruncher motto of hanging up your coats, hanging up your hats, sitting down and studying when most won't. Team Chess Cruncher does. And that makes all the difference. And as Wesley So says, serve the Lord Jesus. As I say, God bless. And I'll see you next time on Chess Cruncher TV. Have a blessed morning, afternoon, and evening, Lord willing. I'll be back on tomorrow. We'll keep pushing forward. But always remember that, you know what Hannibal Smith has said is right. There are no random positions and there is no randomness. Everything has a purpose, and the Lord even has a purpose for you, my friends. So just keep that in your forefront, that He loves you. Okay, I will see you tomorrow, my friends. And remember what Hannibal Smith said is he loves it when a plan comes together. And we love it when a plan comes together on the board, don't we, team? Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Be blessed, and we'll go over our next section in the past pawns and have fun. Okay, bye bye, Team Chess Cruncher. Hoorah.